Jordan. Steve, take us away, please.
All right. Thanks for being here to learn about permission numbers. I am going to drop in the chat a link to the ctcLink Reference Center QRG. That is a global thing around the process. So keep in mind that there is also a local handout that Yulia is going to be talking about as well. But I'm all about the references for these new processes because it's a lot to just try to remember from seeing something one time. That's actually something that I state board practice, right? When we were in WebExes these past few weeks, and we were asking, okay, how does this work again? They were always drop those QRG links in the chat, which really appreciated that because it kind of helps build that muscle memory that don't just try to remember all of this in your head. Once you've done it a few thousand times, it'll get a lot easier. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I'm going to be sharing our test environment, also referred to as the PCD environment. So this is not the live environment for this. So it's good for demoing and for testing things out. Now, on here, you'll see I do have a tile here that has class permissions. So I've put that there. And if you are going to be a frequent user of generation and managing of class permissions, I'm going to strongly encourage you to add that as a tile on your homepage. But since that may not be how you get there, I'm going to go through the navigation. So you'll use your little compass looking navigation bar thing in the upper right and go to navigator. Oops, and I'm already kind of there. So you'll start here with all the choices. And you're going to want to look for records and enrollment. And then term processing, class permissions, and class permissions. And then you will end up on a page that looks something like this. And here is where you can find, and it's hard to see it on my screen, but you should have like three little dots next to your compass where you can click and add it to your homepage. And if you do that, then you'll have that tile for easy navigation in the future and just make your life a lot easier. On this page, it is asking for some criteria for me to get into what I want to do. I already have the academic institution, our code, WA080 pre-filled. If that's not pre-filled, you'll want to type that in. There is a way in your preferences to put that in so that will auto-populate. And then you're going to want the term. If you can't remember what the term code is, the handy dandy little magnifying glass next to the box is what'll help you out and bring up like more terms than you ever really wanted to know about. So you can scroll through that. And let's say winter's coming, we're going to start registering next week. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. And again, after you use this 2221, oh, I don't know, say 50 or 100 times, you'll probably just have it in your head and you won't need to use the little magnifying lookup anymore. Next, we can put in the subject area. This is going to be really helpful if you're only managing, your particular program so that you're not kind of seeing everything under the sun. You can also use the magnifying lookup here. Do we have a preference of what to use here for a subject area?
We got some faculty members in attendance. So would you guys like to volunteer for your subject?
Shout one out.
ISIT.
Thanks,
ISIT.
Carl.
So I could scroll through my list, or I could also type in up here and get to it quicker. Okay, I've put that in. I don't really need to put in any additional information unless I wanted to get really granular. And what I do when I click on search is I see all of the different courses that exist. So 300, 310, 312. Which one would be good?
330.
330. Okay, and I can click on any of these that's hyperlinked here, and that will get me then into the section. And what I want to do, point out here to start with, permission numbers are section specific, down to that specific, A section, B section, who's the instructor for that term. And so I see that this is for Carl here. So if there were multiple sections, and I can tell there's only one because I see 1 of 1, but if I was doing English 101, I might see 1 of 50 or something like that. In that case, right, I need to make sure that I'm not inadvertently creating permission numbers for a section that I didn't really want to be creating permission numbers for. So good to confirm information like instructor. It's going to have the actual section there as well.
Hey, Steve, so this would be my section, but what if I inadvertently picked another instructor's section? Would I have the permissions to actually provide a permission code or not? Does the system lock me out?
So Yulia, do you want to speak to our approach on that, on permissions?
Well, good question, Carl. As far as the setup, we right now only have given the access to this screen to the division staff and program chairs. And if there is someone else who would need to be having these permissions, such as faculty member who is just eager to issue his own permissions or her own permissions, please ping us, give us your employee ID, and with Dean's approval and program chair's approval, you guys will have the ability to generate the code. And this ability is restricted by academic org. So we will have certain boundaries in that sandbox, so to speak. So if you are not able to issue the permissions, you probably are not even going to be able to look up the sections.
Okay. So Shannon's on the call. As a program director, would you prefer that you or the program chairs handle all this, or would you be happy to farm it out to faculty also?
I just sent you a message if you look in the chat, Carl. In IBIT for the bachelor's programs, the program managers are primarily going to give out the entry codes because we check the students' ed plan. We make sure they're supposed to be in that class. We make sure they really need an entry code. I talked to Stuart Ketchum today, who I think has reached out to you also.
Yes.
And so I'm going to work with him because he has a special situation. So
awesome.
You can
this is great.
Our way. Yeah. But it's still good for you to know in case I'm, out sick or something like that. So.
Well, then I would have to request special permission. So I don't.
Well, but you can give them to your class. You just can't give them to anybody else's class.
Is that right, Yulia? I can give them to my class?
You can have access to whatever ISIT sections, Carl. We can only restrict by the subject area and academic org. You're probably not going to be able to give access to the English sections or math sections, probably to the best. So there will be some boundaries, but we really hope, and that's our request for you guys, when you are working on generating the codes, that you actually find just this particular section, and it's a critical piece because you will have more abilities than before.
Yulia, can I ask a dumb question then? This may be a really
no
dumb
such
question.
thing.
I know it's not. It seems dumb in my head. So let's use so Carl teaches this class. So any instructor teaching a class, they can give entry codes to their own classes without us, the division, stating that instructors need permission to access their own classes' entry codes. Did that make sense what I just said? Like any instructor can give a permission code to any class that they're teaching. Is that correct or incorrect?
Great question, and that's something we will still have to figure out to the degree. What this screen does, this replaces the old tool which we used to have in HP to generate the entry codes.
Yeah, right.
We are not trying to erase whatever practices other programs and divisions had. This is just a tool, right? This is a tool which is more powerful than what we used to have. And we will need to learn together how to use this tool better for everyone to have a good time, basically, and help out the students. And this is just access to the tool. We are not trying to rewrite the processes.
I know,
That's
but
not
if
our
we're
intent.
using Carl as the example, I don't want to take up too much time, but does Carl, without like Liz saying Carl should have access to entry codes to his own class, do faculty have access to entry codes for the classes they're teaching without
Not
someone?
at the moment.
Not at the moment. Okay, thank you. That answered my question. Okay, I got it.
We are slowly unraveling the access,
Okay,
and
okay.
right now it's a limited group of people who
I
have
understand.
been given the access
Okay.
already.
Thank you, Yulia. I appreciate that. Okay, Carl, come to me.
Yeah, thank you for those answers. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've come to this page because you want to create some permission numbers. There's lots of things, there's lots of things that are sort of pre-filled and pre-checked, and you need to, they're all important, and they all impact how these work or don't work. So it's good to pay attention. So the very first one is this expiration date. And that is just exactly what it sounds like. And that's a date that you can specify that code is no longer going to work to do what it is built to do. So let's say a class, you need a permission number because a class requires permission from every student to add. Instructor permission is required across the board for everyone. If I'm going to create permission numbers and I don't want my students registering late, then I would specify on that expiration date, and I can manually type it in or I can navigate on the calendar, right? The quarter starts on the 3rd and the last day for open registration, meaning without specifically needing to get that extra layer of instructor permission for late registration, would be January 5th. Right? So this code is not going to be good on Thursday and Friday because I have set it to expire on January 5th. Now let me talk about all of these boxes. I'm actually going to go ahead and uncheck all of them because I want to talk about them one by one. Let's start with closed class because it's the terminology is the most problematic. It should be something like overload the class and overload the waitlist, because that's exactly what this first one does. So when can you use closed class? Once the quarter starts. So that's kind of the instructor permission, overload the class and or late registration type thing. And waitlist shuts off before the quarter, so you don't want to mess with the waitlist before the quarter starts. Closed class is only if you want to overload the class. Pay attention to what your division and your program kind of business practices are around when that's appropriate, which my guess is going to be pretty limited circumstances. I know there's contract issues around overloading class caps, so use that one with big time caution. The next one is requisites not met. That means the prerequisites are not met, so you're overriding prerequisites. I'm going to come back, we'll come back to that one in a minute. The third one, middle one, consent required. This is everyone needs permission to get in to the class. Everyone has to have a code, hands down. Let's say I check that one. Career restriction, we don't use at all, so it never needs to be checked. And then the last one, permission time period, that's kind of the late registration, and I'm going to talk about that one separately in a minute as well. But back to the kind of a basic example, I just want it for permission is required for everyone to add. It's not for late registration. It's not for overloads. And I can go down here and I can, if I wanted 5 codes, I could say 5 codes. and generate, but then there's this checkbox right next to it. Set all permissions to issued. I strongly recommend to mark set all permissions to issued when generating, because then when I click save, it has put this number that you see here in issued by, that's my EMPL ID. So it has now, the system has now tagged that these 5 permission numbers were created by Steve Downing on November 23rd, 2021. None of them have been used, obviously, because they were just created, right? When a student actually uses it to register, it will populate the student's ID and name here for kind of record keeping and audit purposes. And then from here, if I could just, take a, copy and paste of these, or just, give those out directly from my screen. If I created a lot of codes and I want to manage those in a better interface, this little Excel looking sheet here, if I click on that, that allows those to be downloaded. It probably won't show in Zoom here, but if you click on that, it'll give you the ability to download those codes in an Excel table. Now, let's say I had created these codes and I really meant them to also override prerequisites. I don't have to go back and create new codes. I can manage the codes that are already issued down here with these tabs. So I'm on general info. There's also permission and comments, and then this next kind of a bullet looking thing. And what that fourth one there does is it puts everything all together on one row. I kind of like that because then I'm not having to click through as many tabs. And so here's where I could come back in and say, yeah, you know what? These are all good for overriding prerequisites. Or maybe I give these out to 5 students and I find that one of them had a special case where they didn't meet the prerequisites, and there's a special reason why that this should be overridden with this permission number. And then I would take care to only select requisites not met on that one particular number line. So they can be modified here up until they're used. Be careful around that though, because the student won't necessarily know that you're changing things here in this system. They don't get any sort of real-time look into what you're doing on the back end of the system.
Steve, can I ask a quick question about the issued? I generated some and I didn't set all permissions to issued, but
yeah,
if you didn't do that, I know this is more of a pain, but you can go in and click issued when I issue each one if I wanted to. More work, but
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The reason I'm so strongly suggesting that you set all permissions to issued, because let's say there's a question comes up around some permission numbers. Hey, what's going on with permission numbers for this ISIT 330 class? Something odd is going on in there. If I come to this screen, I'd be like, yeah, there's some codes there. Well, who did that? Well, I don't know, because they didn't mark that they were issued. So it hasn't tagged who did that.
Right.
Now, I could leave that blank, and I could, if I wanted to, I'm going to talk more about comments. I could come over here in the comments and do whatever I wanted, right? So that somebody would know, oh, those are Steve's codes.
Well, and I have an accounting capstone where right now I have a new person. So there's 2 of us that might be issuing these codes. So I generated them. And then we said, when we give one out, we will click issued, because there might be 2 of us giving out entry codes. Would that be okay?
So let me talk, it is okay, but
Okay.
let me suggest a better approach. So if you want to indicate that code has been given to a student.
Yeah.
So it's and this is kind of what we learned as a best practice from a couple other colleges, that rather than using the issued by checkbox to indicate that, is actually the comments is the better,
Okay.
code for, John Smith, and maybe, put in his, his EMPL ID down there, and use that comments box to indicate which student a code was issued out to. If you're not going to mark the issued by when you're doing the creation, just keep in mind that if there are questions later on who did that, there won't be any way to know. I'll just
Right,
see,
but
oh,
if-
there's some codes and I don't know who made
Right.
them, but
But as long as when I give out the code, I click issued, because I could have, in this, you could have different issued by people, right?
Mhm.
Like if I give out John Smith a code and I didn't set all permissions, so it's all blank, but I gave John Smith a code and I made sure to remember to click issued, it'll put my ID. And then if Itzy
Right.
goes into the second one and issues it to Jane Smith and she clicks issued, then her ID will come up in the issued by.
Correct, right?
Okay.
So it really just is a matter then if whether and how you want to use this comments
Okay.
field, and also think about how many people are ultimately going to have permission to be issuing. If you keep the issuing permissions small, I think that works.
Yes. Okay.
If you grow that, I think that you may find pretty quickly you kind of have a mess here and you're not really sure who's doing what.
I agree with you. And this is a unique situation, I think, right now. I think generally speaking, what you said to do first is what most people will probably do if everybody needs a permission, just do them all and then, okay, cool. Thanks.
Right. And actually Clark's model, which we're not fully adopting at this point, was that they create their codes kind of as needed, student by student. So you're creating one code, marking it as issued and putting the student's name over in the comments. But they also have essentially all of their faculty in the system issuing codes. We're not ready to, pull that jump cord yet and say, yeah, let's fully embrace that. That may be a place to go eventually, but as part of that, think about how this works. I think for the initial winter quarter, if you're able to get in here, the most important things are going to be expiration date, which of these check boxes you check, and then how you manage the actual distribution of the numbers out to the students. So you want to be careful, obviously, that you don't give a number to more than one student, since it can only be used once by a student, and then once it's used, it's done. I also believe that if you issue it to a student and for some reason that same student needs a number again, that you're going to need to give them a new number. I don't believe that they can be reused in this system the way they could in the old one. If, let's say, I created these codes, right? I created these codes to expire on the 5th, but now I have students who are wanting to register on Thursday and Friday, so the traditional sort of late registration time period. Then I'd have to come in and maybe I'm just going to create one, and then I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to say, okay, this one is good until Friday. And in that case, then I also want to point out and talk a little bit more about permission time period. Permission time period is pre-built into the system to say if the student has a permission number and the permission time period box is checked, they can register until either the expiration date or the end of the permission time period, whichever is later. And that's important for a pretty big reason that I'll get to, right? So I'm going to check permission time period. I'm going to say, oh, and interestingly enough, when I do this, set all permissions to issued, it reset the ones I'd previously done. So that's kind of interesting behavior there. And then I'm going to save. And so I see now down here, I have one code that is set for permission time period, and I can see that the expiration date is the 7th. If I didn't pay attention and I let this expiration date be the default, let me actually see if I can. So if I go back, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to go back to class permissions, put in the term ISIT 330, and I come back here. what you'll see is it has reset my expiration date to the end of the quarter, and it's checked all the boxes again. Hence why these are super important, because let's say I came in and I said, yep, generate a code, said it is issued. We'll generate the code, I save. Now this code down here is good until March 23rd, and it blows past everything. This last box, the permission time period, only goes until the 10th day, the end of the second week. So even though I set it to be for March 23rd, it doesn't mean that the students can register all the way until the last day of the quarter. It does mean that they can register during the dean approved second week. So you have great power by having the ability to come in here. And so if you, oops, I didn't really mean for that to be 323. If it hasn't been given out or it hasn't been used, you could rush right in here and say, nope, I want that to be 01/07/2022 and save. And now it's saved.
Steve, can I ask a quick question about the requisite not met?
Yep.
So again, I'm sorry, these sound like dumb questions.
No,
but
they're asking all
so
the good questions.
when I check requisite not met, that is me as a person knowing that said student has not met a prerequisite for a course. So I'm checking the box. I might write a note or something in there, but it is not like checking the catalog. It's not connected to a system that is checking anything else. It's just me as a person saying, this student doesn't need it for whatever reason. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
So think about your business process there, you know,
Right.
and then also in terms of who's accessing these, right?
Right. Yes.
That's a definite, you know, most of these are used with caution. All of this is really kind of used with caution.
Yeah.
Right. It's powerful. I've mentioned it's like entry codes that took steroids, right? You know,
Yeah.
They can do a lot of things, but there's side effects, and the side effects might not be desirable.
And then again, it's just because I know about this and I'm clicking prerequisite not met just so it's just a tracking. We know that I issued an entry code on a certain date because the student didn't meet the prerequisites, so they needed consent and the student's name's in the comments. So it's more of a,
well, it will, if your course has enforced prerequisites and there's a student who doesn't meet the prerequisites,
right,
and you're giving them the code because it's late registration,
yeah,
but you left this checked, it's not gonna even look at their prerequisite. It's just gonna blow past that and put them in the class.
right.
So
Okay.
that's business process, right? I know some folks from math are probably on here, and you know, going to be really careful about, you know, when that's checked versus, because students really should follow an established placement process and not need that box to be checked a lot. There is one caveat. We're registering it for the first time in a brand new system with extremely complex enrollment requirements that, you know, Yulia and Garrett and others have worked like countless tireless hours to make sure that they're right. And yet, you know, the proof is in the pudding. When students start to register, if there are a lot, you know, if there's issues, and the best solution in that moment is, you know, yeah, I've confirmed, yes, you do meet the prerequisites. I've seen your transcript. We're doing this because we're learning this new system. It's not really part of the long-term business practice. That can be an appropriate use for permission numbers to have that checked. But I would say, you know, make sure that you're communicating in your area around what that means and how that's used, so that, you know, again, you have this power, we're conferring this power onto you. So make sure you understand it, ask questions if you're not sure. That's what this time is.
Yes.
For
I have another question, but I will wait and see if anybody else has any other questions, because I'm asking a lot of them. So I don't know if anybody has their hand up. I'll, you know, let somebody else ask, and then If not,
Not yet. I just would like to add on
Yeah.
on that little conversation about the prerequisites. This is where we have this power balances dance, because historically we have given an ability to issue those codes in HP primarily to the staff members. But I personally think it's not right for the staff member to be making that kind of decision whether it's okay to override the prerequisites for the students or not. This is entirely faculty's decision. But if a staff member consults the faculty, or the student reaches out directly to the faculty, which is commonly the case, and faculty member says, yes, that's okay. I see how they would be successful in that class and how these prerequisite restriction would not apply in this particular case. And faculty member gives an approval for the staff member to issue the code, and then messages it directly to the student, that would be wonderful. And this is where the comments would be very appropriate. So if a staff member says, I am issuing this code per, Dan, who says that that student is very successful and he can do it, right? All
yes.
right.
Yeah, I agree. I know in IBIT, that's how we do it. The example is with Carl student. We have a student who tested out of BISIT 103, which is the prerequisite to Carl's class.
Mm-hmm.
So the student can't register for the class because they don't have the prerequisite, but they tested out of it through a test that Lisa Harris gave the student. So
perfect example. Yes. Thank you, Shannon.
yes.
Was there anything else, Steve, you wanted to cover in the presentation, or should we open it to more questions?
I think this is pretty much the functionality here, again, so maybe just to show a different view, I'll go back and I'll pick, let's actually go ahead and do, well, why don't we do like say math?
Good timing, because Andrea is here with us. She can slap your hand if needed.
Math 142. So what I'll point out here then on this one is now instead of 1 of 1, it's 1 of 12. And this is how PeopleSoft is. It kind of stacks these rows. And so you have to use your little clicker to toggle through. Or if you find that very annoying, you'll see there is a view all. And if I do that, it's going to make like the endless page of scrolling. So personally, I'm like, yeah, I don't think my brain doesn't deal with the endless page of scrolling really well, but that is an option for you to use if you find that that's appropriate. So if I'm back in the view 1, right, I just want to make sure that I'm paying attention to the instructor's name and the section, right? I see here's a couple sections that looks like maybe they don't have instructors assigned yet because it's just blank. I'm in the test environment, so if they were updated,
do not freak out. It's test
test
environment. It
environment,
updates
test
once per
environment.
month, so not necessarily we have the latest and greatest here.
Yeah, it's like once a month they refresh this snapshot. So okay, so other questions? I'm sure there are some.
I do have one. I'll just throw it out there. So, okay, so the class has not started, but it's full. And the student, let's use the student tested out of BISIT 103, is trying to get into Carl's class, but in, December 8th, it's full. And so the student needs a permission to get into the class. The class is full and they want to get on the wait list.
They're not using a permission number. They just get on the wait list.
They just get on the wait list. Okay.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Did you say they don't meet the prerequisites?
They don't meet the prerequisite, right?
Yep. So you would give them, and does it require consent of everyone this class?
No, it does not.
Okay. So to make it kind of look as close to reality.
Yeah.
I mean, most of these codes now aren't going to have anything on them, right? But what I would do is I would have a code issued, check requisite not met.
Okay.
Do not check any of the other boxes.
Okay.
And then set the expiration date as as the 5th. It could even be earlier, but you know, the 5th, that's the 3rd day, meaning that if a spot opens up by the 5th, they can just get in, or they can use the class. Like, let's say they added to the wait list. It would be odd adding to the wait list on that date, but the code technically it's still within a period that
it wouldn't jump them like over a wait, because I'm not using closed class.
Yes, correct.
Closed class is bad because that would
overload and jump the wait list. So don't
use that one. Just
right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All good questions, Shannon. Does anyone else have questions?
Yeah, while we're talking about waitlist, Steve, does the process that we had before still work, in that as soon as the quarter starts, the waitlist doesn't matter anymore? Now it's whoever gets the instructor's attention, I guess.
Right. If the class is still full, then the code would need to have, if it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a class is full, then you just need closed class and make sure that you set, you know, an expiration date to be, you know, Wednesday. Or if you said, you know what, I'll let you in Monday or Tuesday, but that's it. You know, I'm not taking any students on Wednesday. That's business processy kind of stuff. You could say, you know, I'll do an overload, but only the first 2 days. January 4th, closed class only. Boom, issued. Give it out to the student.
And then you can tell the student that your code is going to turn into pumpkin at the midnight on January 4th. And that's going to be a valid statement.
But the students may think that because they were number 1 on the wait list, that they're going to get number 1 entry. So that's still hasn't changed, right?
Yeah, it becomes, it's up to the instructor. Once the quarter starts, there's some thinking. It's not even level to like business process that, you know, ideally to make an attempt at following that order, assuming of course that the students are, you know, if it's an on-campus class, it's obviously easier, is the student showing up and wanting to participate. So if the, you know, the number 1 student doesn't show up on the first day, but the number 2 student is there, is it appropriate to go ahead and give permission for the number 2 student to leapfrog the number 1? I would think yes, but that's definitely at the business process level. That's not incorporated into, you know, anything that the functionality of how this system is working.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to highlight once again that we are not trying to modify the process dramatically. Every program, every division has their established business processes, and this is just a new tool which is more powerful than one what you used to have. That's why we felt inclined that more people need to have hands-on access to the tool. And I'm sure as we work our way through enrollment for winter and spring, we will learn quite a bit and we can adjust the processes as needed. We are not going to be telling you what to do. Your business processes has been working wonderfully. This is just a new tool. I want to point out that enrollment services will be monitoring these processes, and we want to make sure that you do not use closed class all that much. We want to be sure that we do not override prerequisites all that much. But I'm sure there will be cases when it's justified. So if it's justified, you are empowered to make your own decisions and help the students the way you feel suited.
Steve, if you mess something up, like one time I accidentally generated too many entry codes, but the good news is I didn't save them. So then I could just go back and everything was fine. Like, is there a way to
undo?
You cannot delete those codes, Shannon, but it's the distribution what matters.
Right, yes.
Or maybe
No,
you can. Wait, Steve.
You can delete.
Minus thing. You can.
Delete?
Okay, there you go.
I wasn't watching. Can you oh.
Yeah, you can delete the code
okay.
entirely.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
and you're right. If I don't give them out, they just sit there. I didn't want Steve to like look and, oh God, Shannon generated like 300 entry codes. What is she doing?
Shannon was feeling generous. She generated 300 codes and we can just sit there. Why
Okay,
not?
so I can delete. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I mean, having more than is needed isn't a problem if if they're not being given out inappropriately. So, I mean, that was very much the case with the old system. In some cases, way more than would ever be needed is generated. That's on some level, that's fine, but because there's so many, there's so much more ability to have these be customized and different dates and all kinds of things, I would strongly suggest not. You can always come back and add more if you need more that are of a different type. So process wise, to me, it seems it's better to not try to over create, anticipate what the demand will be and try to be close to that and know that if more needed, you can always come back in. That's also a good way to kind of keep tabs on what's happening with classes and and see what hey, wow, this instructor keeps asking to for overload codes. Maybe that highlights something that wasn't highlighted before. Not that that's the intent here. I'll repeat what Yulia says. We're not looking to change the business process around when and how it's appropriate. We're utilizing functionality of the system to do this. So and then we're going to be making sure that students know how to use these, because the student can be there at 3 a.m. and they have their code, 3 a.m. on a Saturday, they have their code and they can get in. It no longer is it tied to, the college, some administrative arm of the college operating on a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Oh, there's a big long list. You're going to have to wait. Like all of that goes away more. There's still humans behind the process. So, it's not completely automatic, but there is a lot more flexibility, more power, more flexibility, and hopefully at the end, a better process for everyone, especially the student.
Thank you, Steve. We had April raising her hand and then Andrea, and maybe we just have time for a couple more questions.
Hi, this
April?
is April.
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
wondering, when I look in my class permissions, my little check boxes are gray instead of blue. Does that mean anything different?
What class did you see? You already created some?
No, just when I go into the class permissions page, I'm seeing what you are looking at here with the 4 or the 5 check boxes, but everything is gray colored and not blue colored. Does that mean anything different?
Would you like to share your screen with us, April?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing and then.
Let's see here.
Mine are also gray, just so, when I go into a new class, they start off all gray and checked, I think. That's what mine look like too, April, just so.
They always stay gray. I mean, when I click on it, the check goes away, but they don't go blue.
And are you in the production environment or the PCD environment?
Yes, I do see PRD in my
Okay.
address up at the top.
Okay.
Yeah, share your screen
Do
with
we
us,
have to-
April. We are very curious to see what it might be a difference between the environments. But
Okay.
you never know.
Mm.
Do you have an ability to share the screen?
You might, whoever's the host might have to. Oh,
Okay, it looks like she's sharing.
Is that
good.
it? Okay. So I
Yeah,
just pulled up it's just gray. Like, can I still do what I want to do?
Looks like you still can do something, and then you can assign in that assign more permission box, enter something, any number, do 1, 5, whatever, generate and see what happens. All right, it works. It's
Okay,
just
just want to make
different color.
sure.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure why it was gray and yours are blue. I just want to make sure.
I'm
It
doing
was
this
more
demo.
fancy.
I'm doing this demo on a Mac, and so it might just be browser. It could be a browser difference in terms of the color, but yeah, it looks like you have the functionality that you need.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But on
Thanks for
Steve's
bringing
screen,
it
you
up,
could
April.
choose in the entry code or the permission code line. I didn't see that in April's.
Oh, so April, do you want to share again?
And I don't see it on mine, so that's why I'm asking.
You got to click that little button.
It's like the
Steve.
little
Yeah.
the thing at the end after the 3 tabs. I don't have a good name
April,
for
if
it.
you don't mind, share it again with us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, the down in the class permissions data, there's 3 tabs and then like it looks like a sheet thing or a
Oh, this?
Yeah, expand it, so we can see.
then it
the
gives
whole
you
thing.
it just sort of gives you everything all in one, so you don't have to tab through stuff.
Okay.
And then that's where, yeah, you can control everything there in terms of the, do you want to mark it as issued, meaning that you've generated it? Do you want to change the expiration date? Which of the boxes do you want to check? Do you want to make a comment? And then any changes that you would make, just remember to save after you're done.
What if we have a class that is set up, like I'm looking at this Math 84, where add consent, instructor consent required?
Yep. So every student is going to need a permission number that is configured with that consent. I believe it's consent. If you could flip back to the class.
Yeah, it's
tab.
PeopleSoft lingo consent. Yeah, that's
Yep.
exactly right.
Consent required. Does it make a difference between department and consent, instructor and consent? No, it's just consent. It's like a P in the HP lingo. It'd be like putting the P on the class.
Yes, I remember that. So we would have to go in and create, because there's 7 students for this class, so we would need to go and generate 7 codes with consent required for this.
Well, you're going to have this class in the winter?
Yes.
And do you think you'll have 7? Or more?
Possibly. What do you think, Andrea?
Yep, I already generated codes.
Oh, you
So I'm
did?
good.
Woohoo!
Wow, excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Your job
Andrea
is
wastes no time. Way to go.
done. Okay.
And we want to emphasize that again. It's all driven by your local business processes. And I know that some divisions, they have SharePoint libraries for the codes, and they distribute it this way. We are not trying to change that in any shape or form. This is just different tool. And you guys know what you are doing when you are collaborating with your deans, with your staff members. There is well-oiled machine we are not trying to break by any means. So all power to you. Hopefully it's more power, not less, but use it with caution. Because Steve be on you.
I'm here to help. There is one additional thing that it hasn't come up, and I'll talk about it briefly. And if it sounds like something that would that you would be interested in, reach out to me specifically. And that's, let's say you are in an area where I have 50 class sections, and I know that potentially all of those instructors might want to be issuing late registration permission for days 4 and 5, or for overloads. And do I really have to go section by section by section by section? There is a batch process that involves things like run control IDs and parameters and the process monitor and whatnot.
These all, you can learn more in these QRGs. QRG, it's like reference centers for the ctcLink. And I highly recommend that everyone reviews these specific QRGs, because it's going to give you just wealth of information.
Right.
And the handout link has been dropped in the chat. If you guys see a way for us to improve a handout, we are all ears. The handout talks about how to look things up in the class permission section, how to toggle between the sections, between you, because you probably will be looking for specific sections. It explains what each box means. It gives you a query. Thanks to our query queen, Jen, for adding this information for us all. We have tailored this particular handout for winter enrollment. So you already have the dates for this particular upcoming quarter, as it's going to be an interesting one for us all. I have so that's what you do for one student at a time. there will be one permission, right? And there will be also a section on the dean's codes for the late enrollment. So ignore that piece because it only applies to the deans. So everyone but Jason, just ignore this piece. All right. Well, I think we are at the time, and your feedback is most welcome and appreciated. And we're just gonna learn together how to make the best use of this new tool.